What's new in QuickBooks Desktop 2020? This is as of release 1, which just got released September 3rd, 2019. Of course, as release 2, 3, 4, 5 come along through the end of 2019 and early 2020, you might see a couple of changes and improvements along the way. I'm going to do a combination of slides and demo. I'm also going to give you my impressions, my first look impressions. That may sound like criticism, but I call it tough love. So it'll be good for you to kind of know what my first impressions are. So when you're looking at it, I hope that you're looking at it with another set of eyes as well. So real quick, today's webinar, we'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the presenter, the webinar series itself. We'll talk about some updates to the ProAdvisor program in terms of pricing. There was, starting today, it's September 3rd, the prices for the ProAdvisor program has also changed. So that's something to consider and to look at. We'll do a quick recap of 2018 and 2019 new features. It's important to add some context. Then we'll dive deep into the new features of QuickBooks Desktop 2020 across all versions, Pro, Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise. Then we'll do Enterprise only, and then we'll quickly just go through the new QuickBooks Mac new features. All right, by myself, I'm Hector Garcia. I'm a ProAdvisor. I'm a CPA. I'm also a QuickBooks Solutions provider. If you're unfamiliar with my work, I think the best thing is to go to YouTube, search for my name, and watch my videos. If you are a reseller of Intuit, you probably have this information already. If you're not a reseller, you may want to become one by partnering up with another reseller like myself. There's my phone number and my email if you're interested on doing that. So hector@garciacpa.com would be for that. Now, what is Advanced Webinars? It's a brand that I created to deliver sort of high quality advanced educational platforms through webinars and webinar series. The current series is only QuickBooks Online. So I'm sort of inserting the QuickBooks Desktop theme into this webinar series because it's the only webinar series I have at the moment. So it's the only place I can massively invite a lot of people at a time. But this webinar series for now is QuickBooks Online only. At the beginning of 2020, maybe right after tax season, I'm going to start a new series that I'm working on, which is going to be 100% QuickBooks Enterprise and mostly sort of advanced inventory type of technique. So just be aware of those. For the time being, the regular webinar, it's every third Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. This is obviously a special occasion, this particular one, and it's scheduled all the way through April 16th, 2020. So the past recorded episodes that we've had has been April through August. We've covered job costing in QuickBooks Online, inventory management part 2, QuickBooks Online for property managers and real estate flippers, bank feeds in depth, and QuickBooks Online for law firms. Those are the 5 modules we've done this year. And if you're a paid subscriber, you can log into the portal and see those 2-hour webinars that we've done this year. Upcoming episodes, we have this month, the 19th, we're doing inventory management part 2. It's going to be mostly focused around workarounds, things that QuickBooks Online is not designed to do, but sort of creative ways we can make QuickBooks Online think. It can be a really good inventory management tool. So we'll cover that in a couple of weeks. Then in October, we're going to cover sort of custom reports. We'll talk about class, locations, customer projects, a little bit of custom fields, a deep dive into QuickBooks Online custom reports. In November, we're going to be doing importing transactions into QuickBooks Online. We'll talk about the built-in features in QuickBooks Online Advanced, and we'll use a third-party app, probably Saasant, my favorite one so far. Then in December, we'll do a deep dive into QuickBooks Online Payroll. We'll kind of set up Payroll from scratch and do the entire process. Then somewhere in December, I'm working on a new webinar called One-Page Marketing Plan for Accountants. I'm still working on it. So the date will be released soon. On January, we're going to be doing advanced user permissions and custom fields. So we're going to be waiting for more user permissions to be added. Hopefully by January, they'll do more in advanced user permissions, and we'll cover that. In February, we'll be doing e-commerce business. In March, we'll be doing retail and restaurant. And in April, we'll be doing some post-tax season tips and tricks. All right. So, if you already are a member, thank you for being a member. If you're not, consider joining the membership so you can access the recordings, get CPE certificates to the webinars that you attended, be able to download all the materials, all that stuff. We have, if you want to join that, go to hectorgarcia.com/advance. About 30% of you have already joined, so no need to talk about that anymore. Now, also, if you have not joined our Facebook group, a QB Power User Community, just search for QB Power User Community in Facebook. Join that group. We can extend the conversation and talk about more advanced QuickBooks topics there. Now, a lot of these official information and screenshots came from Intuit's official Firm of the Future website. So check that out. That's Laura Madera's article. It's excellent. It's the best, most thorough. I would even write an article as close, as good as that. So I took a lot of the information from there, plus some of the own tests that I've done on my own. Now, first, ProAdvisor program. If you are part of the ProAdvisor program and you are a Premier or Enterprise ProAdvisor, is what they call Deluxe and Premier. If you're in the paid ProAdvisor program, starting September 3rd, the renewal cost is going to be $449 per year for the version that comes with QuickBooks Desktop Accountant and the QuickBooks Desktop ProAdvisor exam. And then the renewal cost for the Enterprise version, or what they used to call the Deluxe or the Premier bundle, is going to be $799 per year. That's going to come with QuickBooks Desktop Accountant, QuickBooks Enterprise Accountant, QuickBooks Mac, and QuickBooks Point of Sale. If you only support QuickBooks Online, the ProAdvisor program is still free as of now. But if you're supporting desktop and you want the support and you want the software, these are the new prices to consider. Now, it's also really important to mention, as of May 31st, 2020, and this is not, by the way, new information. Most experienced desktop people kind of know this stuff. May 31st, Intuit stopped supporting any versions 3 years or older. So as of May 31st, 2020, QuickBooks 2017 or older versions will not be supported anymore. This happens every year. What happens when QuickBooks Desktop is not supported anymore? Bank feeds and online banking stops working. Payroll stops working. Payments, if you get paid with a credit card, that stops working. Online backups stops working, and they no longer will provide phone or live support. So you have to make sure that you are on 18, 19, or 2020 by May 31st, 2020, because those are the only versions that will be supported. Now, a quick recap, because a lot of folks are going to be going from 2017 to 2020, first quarter of next year. So I'm going to make a quick recap of all the things that you will additionally get once you go from 17 to 2020 of the things that they added in the last couple of years. So one, they added multi-monitor support, which is great. You can have up to 3 monitors with QuickBooks and you can drag windows across of it. You can add some additional fields in inventory reports. This is useful for adding description, custom fields when you're pulling any sort of inventory report and you're trying to see more of that item. You can do a search inside the chart of accounts, which was a huge upgrade, although it was something minor. It was a huge delighter for a lot of power users. You have a cash and accrual toggle inside the main report, so you no longer have to click on customize report and then do the cash accrual toggle is right there in front of the screen. There's a past due that was supposed to be a S. Okay, sorry, with the hurricane preparations, I've had that much time to spend on spell checking this slide. Sorry about that. So you can get a past due stamp on invoices. There's a new invoice status tracker that kind of gives you basically a history of all the times that you have emailed that invoice or when the customer paid you and that sort of thing. You can now remove the audit trail in an effort to reduce the file size of a QuickBooks Desktop file. You can show inactive items in an inventory evaluation report, which is a huge problem for many years. And the new improved IIF import, and the reason why I put quotes is because there's nothing really been improved about it. It's just a bunch of nuance and nuisance to import IIF files now. But it is a step forward into getting a little bit better sort of error correction. All right, on the QuickBooks accountant world, accountant and enterprise, they added the merge vendors feature. You can merge up to 4 vendors in one shot. So if you have a lot of duplicate vendors, that's a great feature. Again, only in accountant or enterprise. And in enterprise only, they've added, in 2018, they added a mobile inventory scanner support, which is basically, it's a little thing like this. It's basically an Android device with an integrated barcode. And once you connect it to QuickBooks, you can have some additional functionality like scanning items when you're doing an item receipt for purchase orders, picking sales orders, and doing cycle counts, which is really the only big valuable part of that. There's an enhanced sales order manager that's tied to the sort of the mobile warehouse mobile device, an enhanced purchase order manager that works kind of the same way, and an enhanced pick, pack, ship workflow where, most warehouses, they go pick the item, then they pack it, then they ship it, and they want to know the process of how to do that. By the way, I have a question saying, why does somebody want to get rid of the audit trail? That's only to reduce a file size. So that's an option. It doesn't automatically remove it for all files. You now have the option to remove the audit trail. All right, so let's jump right into QuickBooks Desktop. So this webinar is focused on the US version of QuickBooks. I don't have the Canadian version. I would have to install it in an entirely separate computer to even test it. I don't even have time to do that. So none of this stuff is guaranteed to work in the Canadian version or not. So you may need to wait until someone else writes an article on the Canadian edition. This is only for US. All right, so let's start with the features that are going to be available across all versions of QuickBooks Desktop. This is Pro, Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise. So we're going to be able to add a customer PO number to the subject line of the emails. We're going to be able to combine multiple emails for a single customer job, vendor, or employees. So for example, if you have 6 open invoices to multiple jobs for one customer, or even for multiple for the same customer, but multiple invoices, you can in one email attach all of them at the same time. Something that you would have to manually save it into the desktop or something like that, and then use your different email program and attach a bunch of invoices at the same time. So now QuickBooks can batch send in a single email all of these invoices, or for vendors, all the POs, or for employees, all of the pay stubs. Now, they added a new feature that they are calling it automated customer payments reminder. I wouldn't add the word automated in it because it's more semi-automated than anything else. And the reason why that's worth mentioning, it's because the process still requires you to press a button to send those payment reminders. So we'll cover that in detail. Then they added a new company file search, which makes it sort of really easy to search company files inside your computer. I mean, there was in the accountant edition, there was a file manager that helped you do that, but now this is mainstream across all editions. You have this little one tool that allows you to find QuickBooks files. As a matter of fact, it was really valuable for me because I was able to find a file that I couldn't find a couple of days ago. So it was really, really good to have that. Now, the only big feature, the stuff that people will be really delighted about, in my opinion, is going to be horizontal collapse in columns for customer jobs and classes. This is going to be huge, especially for nonprofits that had a lot of sub classes, and they want to do reports just on the parent class, or by manually collapsing any particular classes, or customers with a lot of jobs that want to show reports. We'll demo that, so that will make a lot of sense once we get to demo it. And then the last piece here is payroll status for direct deposit, which I'll just show you a screenshot of that. Now, Laura's in the webinar. Thanks for joining. Laura actually wrote that article. She's saying that the testing shows that the multiple emails works really well when they're all for a single customer with multiple invoices, not necessarily across multiple jobs. Now, that's a good observation, Laura. So if you have invoices across multiple jobs, that won't work. they all have to be within the same job or within the same customer. I think that's what it sounds like. I haven't tested it yet, so I couldn't know that up front. Thanks, Laura, for that comment. All right, so let's talk about adding the customer PO number into the subject line of emails. So this was a heavily requested feature. It's not a huge feature, but for the people that get customer POs, right, where they receive a PO and then they turn that PO into a sales order or into an invoice. One of the very common things that people used to do is that used to manually type the customer's PO into the email body or into the subject so the customer knows, so they can reference their own accounts payable department, right? They can reference their own purchase order to your invoice. So now you'll be able to add that customer PO field. Now, where that comes from is in that header field called PO number, which just doesn't have anything to do with your own POs as a QuickBooks user. This is just a field where you put your customer's PO number. It's basically the reference number that your customer gave you when they placed the order with you. So now you can see that in the subject line of the email. So that's going to be a huge time saver for a lot of people, especially people dealing with inventory and purchase order type of orders from customers. The next feature here that we were mentioning is when you have a bunch of invoices under the same customer or under the same job, not across multiple jobs inside of a customer. Thank you, Laura, for clarifying that. And then you can hit the little checkbox that says combine forms to recipient. And basically you can send one email to a client that contains an attachment of all the invoice. Now, one huge caveat to this, not a huge fan of the fact that they left this out, is if you do this, payments will not work. So if you have QuickBooks Payments, a merchant system, once you send this one batch of invoice, so it'll be a single invoice with a bunch of attachments, there will be no pay now button. Okay, so it works really well for customers that get paid with checks anyway, or if they want to receive maybe one check that pays all the invoices in one shot. But if you want people to pay you electronically, you still have to send each invoice one at a time in order for that payment screen or that pay now button to show up in there. So it's a nice little feature, but sort of incomplete until they add the capacity for customers to pay multiple invoices using the payment screen. So I hope that in release 2, 3, 4, they're working on that and they add that feature. That would be nice. Now, this automated customer reminders, and I'm doing air quotes here, it's not really automated per se. Basically, what you have to do is, and we'll do this one as a demo. So I'll finish doing the screenshots and then we'll jump into the demo to show you this one. What you do is you create basically a mailing list where you select which of your customers you essentially would want to be included in this reminders process. And then once you select all the customers that you're okay with sending additional reminders to open invoices, then what you're able to do is you create a reminder that's set up maybe based on due date, right? Or before due date or after due date. And you will be prompted to batch send a bunch of emails that are basically a reminder that the invoice is open. And those reminders will also show in the sent email tab in the customer window. You will also see inside of the history or the invoice status history, you will also see when the customer had received a reminder. So you'll know when they send an invoice, you'll know when they viewed it, and then you know when you've sent a reminder. So it kind of helps you keep track of how often you're communicating to customers that there's an open invoice, right? Okay, and then the company file search, basically a little button that you click on find company file, and it can search through your computer, in a network folder, in a USB drive or whatever. It will search all the active QB files, backups, company files. You can also search it by name. This actually works a lot better than the built-in window search, okay? Because a built-in window search, it's kind of crappy in my opinion. So this is actually a little bit better. And lastly, on the features that I actually like is the horizontal collapse. All right, so if you're looking at a report where the columns are customer jobs or classes, you can collapse them all and only see the parent customer or the parent class, or you can manually click and open each one. And then we'll just do a screenshot of this one, which is you'll be able to know if there's a direct deposit, you'll be able to know exactly what the status of that direct deposit is. So has the payroll been processed? Has the money been sent to the bank? Has the money been sent to the employees for direct deposit? It's a nice little feature for payroll users. Okay. All right. So let's switch over to the QuickBooks Desktop so we can do a couple of demos here. All right. So let's start with payment reminders. So I'm going to create, this is a blank file here. So I'm going to create a customer and an invoice here. So here's an invoice. I'll pick an item here. Let's say this is 15,000 and I'm going to date this last month and I'm going to give this 30-day terms. So this is officially a past due invoice. That's just a really important piece. You need to have past due invoices for this to work. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this invoice. So we have a couple and I will select a different customer in this case. And we'll do maybe 25,000, same thing, 30-day terms, and we'll hit save. So we got two open invoices from two different customers. So the way payment reminders work is you're going to go into the customers menu, then you're going to click on payment reminders. First thing you have to do is tell QuickBooks which customers you would like to be included in a payment reminder mailing list. So we're going to click on Manage Mailing List. Then we're going to click on New List. Okay. And then let's call this one Past Due. Let's call them Past Due Customers List 1. So I'm going to call this Past Due Customers List 1. Let's assume we're going to have multiple lists, and I'll click on Next. And then I'll be able to choose which customers I'm okay with sending reminders. I'm going to pick the first two and I'm going to leave the third one out. As you can see, I'm not going to include that one in my reminders list. Then I'm going to click on Save and there it is. It's done. I got my reminders list. At this point, I can edit it or delete it and then I can just hit on Close. Second step is I need to now create sort of the frequency. So I'm going to go into Customers, Payment Reminders, and I'm going to click on Schedule Payment Reminders. So Customers, Payment Reminders, and Schedule Payment Reminders. Okay, then I'm going to click on here. I'm going to click on New Schedule. So top right, it says New Schedule. And there's two, so I'll delete one. And then I'm going to select the mailing list that I want this schedule to be for. So it'll be this Past Due Customer List 1 that I created. I'm going to click on Add Reminder. So I'm basically programming a new reminder. And in here, I get to choose what I want the reminder to look from. So I can change any of this stuff that I want to. We can do different types of reminders. We can do a friendly reminder. We can do a collections reminder. We can do, we're going to sue you reminder type of thing. So there's going to be a couple of things you can do here, and you can also insert all sorts of dynamic fields in there. So I'm going to say this is going to be, this is going to be the friendly reminder. I'm going to say this is going to be 1 day after the due date. So as soon as the due date passes and they don't pay us, this reminder will activate. And it won't automatically email to the client, but it'll activate and sort of schedule itself. So I'm going to click on OK. And then I'm going to create a new reminder. And this is going to be 30 days after the due date. And then we're going to do this one. We're going to say, hey, we are going to call our lawyer to collect, right? Whatever it is, right? So this could be like sort of that level 2 reminder, and I'll click OK. So I did two types of reminders, the friendly one and the 30 days after due date. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Save, and I'll click on Close, and that's it. My reminder is set up. Then once you're actually ready to do this, you're going to go into Customers, Payment Reminders, and we're going to click on Review and Send Payment Reminders. So again, this is not automated per se. Let me add my email here. Okay, so this is not automated per se. This is semi-automated. So basically, as you see here, I do have only two open invoices that are in past due, but only one showing the screen because it wasn't part of a mailing list specifically for that. So if I wanted to set up a separate mailing list for that, I would go into Customers and go into Payment Reminders, Manage Mailing List. I'll create a second one, call it Past Due customer list 2. And this is going to be only the third customer. And I'll click on save. And I'll click on done. And then I'll create another. I'm going to create another list. I'm going to do a new schedule. And this one's going to be for list number 2. And let's say list number 2 gets a reminder only 15 days after due date. So I can really customize which customers get what reminder and in what days based on this customer list. And I'll click on save. So if you actually go back and do customers, payment reminders, review and send, only one shows up because the other one is not more than 15 days due. Let's go into the invoices here and show you what I mean. So let's say, for example, I'm going to bring this one back even more. So I want to make these now 15 days due so it shows up in that list. Or at least in theory, right? The way it's designed to work. So I'm pushing these back even further so they do show up 15 days late. So in theory, once I go into payment reminders review, both of the invoices show up. There it is. It's beautiful. So both of the invoices show up here, as you can tell, and at that point I can click on send now, and then all the customers get an email with a copy of the invoice and with a payment reminder. Now, I don't know if this reminders works with payments. From my test, it seems that it doesn't. So if you have payments enabled, the reminders will not give somebody a reminder of the link on where to pay. They will just remind them that they haven't paid you yet. So if that changes, I will certainly announce it and write it somewhere, maybe in the Facebook group. But as far as I know, both the reminders and the batch emailing will not include the payments link in it. Perfect. So that's the reminders. The other one that's worth mentioning, or at least worth demoing in this case, will be the feature on the collapsible classes. So I'm going to go into reports, company financial, profit and loss standard. I'm just going to pull a regular profit and loss. Right, nothing new. This is a regular profit and loss. What happens when I go into show columns and switch this to customer job? And this will work either with customer job or classes. So I'm going to click on customer job, and then we get this mess of a report, right? Where we see the customer's name it's sort of the last total, and then you see the customer name and the job for each one, and then you have to scroll right to see them all. Now, before QuickBooks 2020, there was no way to collapse sub-customer jobs or sub-classes. You would have to export to Excel and do it in Excel. So now there's a button here that says collapse columns right next to collapse rows. If I click on collapse columns, voila, all of my jobs go away and they get all collapsed into the parent customer. Now, this is amazing. This is a huge, this is something that should have been in QuickBooks Desktop a very long time ago. And this is something that QuickBooks Online should do as well. But for whatever reason, it took them 30 years to come up with this, because this is, just double check. I'm going to hit Control-1 on the keyboard. This is, QuickBooks Accountant 2020. It's actually version 30, right? This is the 30-year version of QuickBooks. I assume since QuickBooks DOS version 1, I assume that's when they started counting. But this is, the 30th release of QuickBooks Desktop. Is amazing. And it did take them 30 years to do collapsible classes. So that's pretty interesting. I don't even know if, when classes were introduced in the QuickBooks Desktop world. But anyway, so you see these little plus signs here. I can click on any of these plus signs and it will expand just that customer job in this case, right? So you can hit plus in any of these and it will expand and collapse any specific one, or I can click on expand columns and it expands them all, and collapse columns and it collapses them all. Now the other one is classes. So it only actually works in customer jobs or classes. It doesn't work in any other dimensions that have subcategories, unfortunately. But hey, we get what we get, right? So I'm going to actually go to class here to show you, and these are my collapsed classes. So I'm going to click on expand columns on the top right. And now I can see all my classes with my subclasses, which is the way that QuickBooks normally shows it, or before 2020, this is how it showed it. So I can manually collapse any of these classes right here. And these are my parent classes, manually expand any of them. It's really awesome. It's really a beautiful thing. I love this feature. this is probably the only one that really makes sense to upgrade to 2020, especially if you're in the Pro Premier accountant world, right? When you're not an enterprise, because we'll get really deep into the enterprise features, which is a whole nother ball game. But in this world, in the Pro Premier world, collapsible classes might be the single thing that makes people upgrade. I know off the bat a lot of my customers that have been waiting for this feature for a very long time. All right, so let's switch back to the PowerPoint. I'll check to see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, I don't see any questions or comments. For the most part, the comments are positive. They really like that collapsible feature. Now, QuickBooks 2020 Accountant Edition and Enterprise Edition are available today. Pro Premier Editions, I don't know what the official release date. It could be anywhere in the middle of September, or it could go all the way to October. So the mainstream Pro Premier Editions, we don't know. I haven't received an official release date. If somebody that knows writes to me, I'll say it verbally, but I don't know the official release date. I do know that today, September 3rd, Enterprise and Accountant will be open for anybody that actually has, like most ProAdvisors that are on the desktop ProAdvisor will be able to access these features. Okay, so let's move on to QuickBooks Enterprise features 2020. And there's 4 major features. One is the inventory cycle count. This actually was a mid-year update to 2019. So if you're in Enterprise 2019 and you update it to the latest release, you will see that inventory cycle count. You will absolutely see inventory cycle counts in that feature, but this is officially released for 2020, but you will see it on mid-year or 2019. There's landed cost calculation, which basically, this is very funny. Intuit takes the semi-official workaround for landed costs, one that Doug Sleater has been talking about for years. Joe Wooder has been talking about it. Michelle Long, me. You can see a lot of videos and a lot of content out there of the workarounds for landed costs. And QuickBooks never really resolved landed costs. What they did is they automated our own workaround. So it's kind of interesting. I'll show you how that works. I'm liking it. I have mixed feelings about it, just because the interface is a little bit cookie, but it does achieve what we want to achieve. So we'll do a demo of that, because that's probably one of the most exciting things to demo. There's also alternate vendors. This is huge conceptually, not huge on release 1, and I'll explain why. I'll kind of tell you all the downfalls of it, but this is huge. Now you can have a preferred vendor and 4 additional alternate vendors, and you can store the cost per alternate vendor, especially for items and inventory. You can store lead time information. You can store a new concept called vendor part number, which is kind of like manufacturer's part number, but unique to each vendor. So I think landed costs and alternate vendors, the only ones that we'll spend a lot of time on this webinar on. For the inventory cycle counts, I got videos on that. So in the slides, there's 2 videos that explain that process. So I'll defer to that. And improved express pack ship. I should have put quoted under improve, because I'm still not a huge fan of the pick pack process in QuickBooks Enterprise. I still think it's a bit cumbersome. I think it's a lot of work still, but I think they're getting there. This is the 3rd iteration of mobile warehouse. I think they're getting there. At some point, it might be something that's actually useful that I implement to my clients. So we'll cover that with screenshots only. Okay, so let's talk about cycle counts. So QuickBooks Advanced Inventory Enterprise or Enterprise Platinum added a new cycle counts feature that allows you to basically organize a cycle count session. So let's say, for example, you say, today I want to count all shirts. Today I want to count all laptops. Today I want to count all perishable goods, whatever, however is it that you divide your warehouse. So you go into this screen called a new cycle count. You choose the items that you're going to schedule for a cycle count. Then you can either, if you have that mobile warehouse solution, that Android device has a built-in barcode, you can either send it to the warehouse person, and the warehouse person can in the warehouse. While they're on the warehouse, they can basically choose the new counts for the products, the updated counts, and send them. This is manually. They can count it manually, put it in the device, or they can even scan them, and then however number of scans you do would be the cycle count that could be on the device. You click on finish and it sends it back into QuickBooks, so the QuickBooks user can process the cycle count and process the adjustment. The other option is, which I love. This is something that I went completely gaga over when I first saw this. Really, really impressed. And trust me, in the QuickBooks world, I'm not easily impressed anymore. This is the one thing that really blew my mind, because I know that so many of my customers are going to save hours and hours of labor with this, which is an Excel-based cycle count. You go through the same cycle count feature, you pick the items, and then you click export to Excel. Again, I got a video on this that goes into all the details. So it's going to be in the slides, the link. And it exports a spreadsheet with all your current counts. Then you can literally update it on the spreadsheet, import it back into QuickBooks, and it prompts to the inventory adjustment from Excel. That's incredible. Something unheard of in the QuickBooks Desktop world. You had to use special products like Transaction Pro Importer, and even with that, it was a bit cumbersome. So this is an awesome feature. I absolutely love it. I commend the team for doing the Excel-based cycle count. A lot of folks are still using Excel. They can't afford the mobile warehouse system. This is going to be a great way to do quick inventory adjustments. So once the inventory cycle count gets completed, it gets sent back into QuickBooks. The user still decides to make the adjustment or not. So I love that, because the warehouse person doesn't have the power to make adjustments. The QuickBooks user, the accountant, the controller, whomever, will receive the counts back, and they'll decide which ones they want to adjust or not, and they'll be able to see the effect of the adjustment, the adjusting account. They can add a class, whatever. So there's a lot of sort of, it's semi-automated, but I think in a good way, because inventory adjustments should be looked at by somebody high up there in the accounting world. So there's the two videos you can watch. One goes to the mobile scanner feature. The other one goes to the Excel cycle count. I guarantee you'll love this if you got enterprise clients, heavy inventory clients on Pro Premier. This would be a great reason to move them into enterprise. All right, so let's move on to landed costs, and we'll do a demo of this, because you have to see a demo of this. I mean, this is the most amount of new windows and new featurettes I've seen inside QuickBooks in a very long time. There's a lot of sort of moving parts into this. But basically, you turn on the landed cost feature in the advanced inventory section. This is only on the Platinum edition of Enterprise. You have to pick a other current asset account to be the clearing account for your shipping expenses. We'll show that. You have to create an item. You have to create an item where all these landed cost components are going to be sent into. This could be shipping, this could be customs, this could be insurance, all those things that essentially need to be added to the cost of inventory. You're going to pick which items point to that clearing account, and then you're going to have a new screen where you can allocate that. So that's going to just look much better in the demo, just showing you what the screenshot looks like. And then once the prices are updated, QuickBooks will give you the choice to update the selling price, because sometimes we have specific markups that we want to have, and if our shipping cost and insurance cost and freight cost, customs, whatever, increase the cost of our product, technically we should increase the sales price of the product as well. Then you're going to see a new little tag on the right that says includes landed cost, and it will proceed to do sort of that landed cost, classic landed cost workaround. And you're going to see the item prices go up, and then you're going to see the clearing account go down. I have to show that with the demo. So let me switch over to the demo. Alrighty, so we're gonna do landed cost. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the edit menu, preferences, then I'm gonna go to items and inventory. I'm gonna go to company preferences. So I'm gonna turn on landed cost. Okay, so I'm gonna click on setup landed cost, and basically what this screen forces me to do is to select a other current asset account or create a new other current asset account to be my clearing account for shipping. So I'm gonna call this clearing landed cost account. Okay, so I'm creating a new other current asset account. Now I completely hate the fact that I can't choose a cost of goods sold account. I really hate that. So again, in this screen, you're forced to create a new current asset account or pick a current asset account. I wish I could have picked the cost of goods sold account, but that just was not there. I suggested it to the development team. I think they didn't understand the reason why, but it's a whole other ball game. For now, it's going to be another current asset account. I'm going to click on save and close. And then it says, hey, no items are mapped to that. That's okay. We're going to click on add later and we'll show you that. Okay, good. So now landed cost is quote unquote officially enabled. So I'm going to click okay and okay. So now I'm going to create a couple of items here. And let me start with it needs to be an other charge. And I'm going to call this shipping. This could be a double-sided item, that's okay. And I have to make sure that clearing landed cost account is selected as the expense account. On the income account, I can just call this one shipping income, whatever it happens to be. And then I click OK. So I got my item for shipping that is pointing to the correct account. I'm going to create another item. I'm going to call this one customs duties, right? Tariffs, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to send this to the clearing landed cost accounts. And I'm not going to make this one a double-sided item. I just want to make sure this goes to the clearing account. There you go. And then I click OK. And then I'll do one more and I'll call it insurance. Insurance. And I'm going to send this one into my landed cost clearing account. So there you go. So as long as I got items that point to that landed cost clearing account, we're good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of inventory parts here. So let's do widget 1 and we send this to cost of goods sold and sales. And let's make this one a cost of 50 and a sales price of 100. And we'll click on OK. And then I'm going to duplicate this one. And then we'll do widget number 2. And let's make this one a cost of 100, sales price of 180. Kind of varying these things. I'll click OK one more. And I'm going to double click here, duplicate, and duplicate screen. And then I'm going to do widget number 3. And we're going to make this one $15, sales price 25. So I got a variants of widgets here that we're going to be using. So now I'm going to go into vendor, enter bill, right? So I'm basically going to get a bill. Let's call this one wholesale world. And we're going to go ahead and bring a couple of items in here. So I'm going to bring widget 1, widget 2, and widget 3. I'm going to bring 100 of each. Okay, this is going to make it very easy to visually see it. So I'm bringing 100 of each. I'm going to click on save. And what you need to keep in mind is I'm going to go into my inventory valuation summary, and we're going to be monitoring this, okay? And these are the cost of our products: 50, 100, and 15. Now, what will happen is we're going to probably start calling. We're probably start calling. We're going to probably start paying shipping and customs and insurance and all these things. Looking at an inventory valuation report that shows me all the costs based on the original bill. So now we're going to have some additional bills. Let's say, for example, we have some shipping companies that are going to be charging us for shipping, or we're going to be paying customs and all sorts of things. So let's call this one DHL. Okay, and we're going to pay for shipping. Let's say we paid $500. Okay. Let's make it more expensive, $5,000. Okay, so shipping, I paid $5,000. I'm going to go ahead and click on save, and that's it. And then I'm going to create another bill completely separate. Let's call it Freight Insurance Company, and they're going to be insuring our cargo. So I'm going to put here insurance, and this is going to be, let's say, $2,500. We'll change the date of that. Click on save. And we'll do one more. Let's say U.S. Department of customs, whatever it happens to be called. And then let's say we're going to be paying some custom and duties of $1,800, okay? Because we're importing from China or whatever, right? So we'll click save and done, all right? So I got three separate bills, three separate expenses that are affecting the cost of my product, essentially, right? But they're not showing in my valuation report as such. As a matter of fact, if I go into my balance sheet, they're sitting there on my clearing landed cost. So right now, all those three expenses are not a cost yet. They're not an inventory cost yet. They're just sitting in my balance sheet. $9,300 just sitting in my balance sheet, right? So now what I want to do, or what I would like to do, is to spread those $9,300 across my inventory assets evenly, fairly, whatever number you want to use. And that's what the landed cost feature does. So sorry for the long introduction. I think it's important to kind of set up that premise, because otherwise it's difficult to understand what we're doing. So again, we're going to spread the $9,300 into the $16,500. So we're going to go back into the bill that contains the items. Okay, so there it is. There's my bill that contains the items. And we're going to see a button on the top right next to pay bill that says calculate landed cost. So we're going to click on calculate landed cost. And then this new screen pops up. Okay, I got to tell you something. I absolutely hate how when they change the interface, right? Like QuickBooks Desktop is supposed to look a certain way, and they add these new windows that completely kind of throws, this throws off the users big time. Now, sorry to get off my soapbox for a second, but these things drive me absolutely insane. I hate this, okay? But it still works. So we'll talk about the positive things, what works. So then here in the bottom, you're gonna see all of the items and you're gonna see their costs, okay? And we're gonna click on the add bills button. So there's a little add bills button. And then this will show me, let me see, let me click on this here. This will show me all the bills that have items that were mapped to that clearing account. So any bill that contains items mapped to the clearing account will show on this screen. Okay. So now you can choose which of these bills. You can do all of them. You can do some of them. You can choose which of these bills you want to allocate. Okay. In this screen, you don't do anything else but just choose the bills. Let's say all three of them need to be allocated into the item cost. So I'm going to click on add bills. Okay. So now, and this is really, really important. Now you're going to see all the amounts to allocate. You don't have to allocate the entire amount. Sometimes you can have a DHL bill that's for 3 shipments, right? So maybe you want to use, a third of that towards this or some of it. Now, these screens unfortunately don't really respect the common QuickBooks interface where I can just do a sort of a built-in calculator. I can't. I hate that. I can't put 5,000 divided by 2. I can't, right? It doesn't work. So I actually manually have to put, let's say 2,500, because I only want to allocate half of that shipping, because only half of the shipping belongs to this one shipment, for example, right? So that's something just really important to notice. The other thing that I dislike about this screen is that it doesn't show me the memo line. And the memo line could have been really, really useful for me to know when I'm clicking on add bills, it will be really useful for me to know, okay, which of these bills belong to this particular bill, because I could have added some comments in the memo line in the original bill where I can use it here. So you're gonna have to go a lot by memory and manual processes to figure out which of these shipments and insurance and all this stuff belongs to which of the bills that you're bringing in. Anyway, so you manually choose to allocate here how much you want to do it. You can click on view details and you can actually see the line item and you can see the description inside view details, but I wish to see it on the screen. I wish I could at least customize and see it on the screen, because it would be really useful. Anyway, so down here, this is the most important thing, is we're going to choose how we're going to allocate that money. So how are we going to allocate those $6,800 into the rest of that inventory? So I can do a couple of things. I can do by quantity. And this would be a This is based on item quantity. So this will proportionally spread based on percentages across all the items based on its quantity. That could be a good measure to use. I can do it by percentage, which in this case, I pick the percentage. So I can do, okay, I can say, and I have to delete this. I can say 25% goes to this item, 50% goes to this item, and 25% goes to this item. So I can manually pick by percentage where I want to allocate all that cost into each product. I can do it by amount. So in this case, this will do a proportional percentage amount based on the total amount of each of the items, or I can do manual where I basically pick, right? So I can say, okay, this is going to be $1,800 allocated to this item, $4,000 allocated to this item, and $0 allocated to this item. Or let's say $1,000 allocated to this item, okay? And it will do sort of a check to make sure that your math is right. So we'll continuously check. So I manually picked how much of all this money I wanted to put into each of the items. And then I'm going to click on post it to bill. Okay. And then here's the magic question. It says, wait a second. Now before you thought your items costed $50, and because you thought it costed $50, you were charging $100 for it. There's a new landed cost. So the reality is your product actually costs a lot more than what you think it costs. So do you want to change the selling price? So at this point, you can just pick a new selling price if you want to. I wish it multiplied it times the markup, because that would make tons of sense, but it doesn't work. And I wish you can have a calculation here. So if I wanted to do 68 times 2, it doesn't work. So it's manual process. Boo QuickBooks for totally botching this screen. This was really forced in there. If you want this screen to work, the markup needs to be either applicable, or you need to have the built-in calculator so I can calculate how much I want to charge for these things. But whatever. Let's say, for example, I'm going to manually I want to change this to 120. I want to change this one to 225. And I want to leave this one at $25. Let's say move it to $35. Okay, so now I'm going to do that, and then I can click on update and proceed. And what this will do is actually will go back to my item list and change the item price, the sales price, not the cost, but it'll change the sales price. Okay, that way it'll prevent you as a user potentially screwing up and charging the wrong amount. Again, nice touch, but the screen itself falls short in functionality. So now what you can see now is the item cost for each one was raised. So the landed cost raised the item price of each of these items just for the purposes of the PO. And then my item amount is obviously now higher than my bill amount. And the difference is actually going to be hit against my clearing account. So this is how landed cost works. It sends it back into the clearing account, and then we're going to hit save and close. And yes, and yes. So what would happen is, and exactly as we expected, now notice that my inventory cost is now at the correct amount, what it actually cost me to bring my inventory in. This will give me the correct cost of goods sold. This will give me the correct profit per invoice. This will give me the correct profit per rep. A lot of my clients pay commissions to the reps based on profit. So this will actually solve that issue, which should be a big deal. Now, if you wanted to go back and kind of undo that, okay, we can go into this bills. So I'm going to go back into the bill. Okay, and there's a little thing here that says remove landed cost. Okay, so if I click on calculate landed cost again, it will basically prompt me to keep adding more bills and more things to it. So I can't undo it in steps. I would have to undo the whole thing. So if I click on remove landed cost and click on yes, you go back and check if that works. Let's try it again. Remove landed cost. Do you want to remove landed cost? Yes. Okay, there it is. So I send it back to where it's supposed to be. Click save and close, and it basically undoes the whole thing. It goes back to the original valuation, and it sends the money back into the clearing landed cost account. Now, one of the comments here is couldn't you just use customer jobs to solve this problem? Yes, you could avoid the whole landed cost. You can send all the shipping and insurance things to the customer and job and get the correct customer and job profit, but you will not get the correct profit per invoice. And sometimes the profit per invoice is valuable. So, and then the other thing is, obviously, what this landed cost is attempting to do is helping you fix the item sales price. So when I go back into my items, if I go to widget 1, originally I had put that the sales price of this widget is 100. Because of the landed cost workflow, it prompted me to put 120, right? Same thing with widget number 2. Notice that originally, I don't remember what the dollar amount I had here. It was like 180. I pushed this and I moved it to, I moved this one to 225 based on that. And then when I went into widget 3, same thing. I changed that from 25 to 35. So I think one of the things that landed cost, one of the great things about it is potentially prompting me to charge the right sales price, so I can correct the behaviors of, not making money on the items because I've misunderstood my cost. But that screen really, really needs to be improved, in my opinion. Okay, so that's landed cost. That was kind of a big deal. Let's go to the next feature here, which is alternate vendors. Again, landed cost is a really, really important thing. Really important thing for inventory clients. And here I have a comment from Patricia that says, interest note, even though I undid the landed cost, the price change stayed. That's right. If I do a price change, that's permanent, even if I undo the landed cost. Remember, the price change is only for the sales price, not for the cost. And once you change it, that's it. The next big feature, and this is big. This is bigger than landed cost and has a lot of potential. Right now, it's kind of an incomplete feature. I'll explain to you why, because I've been testing it and I was so disappointed where it fell short. But it's a great feature, huge. I mean, the implications for inventory companies are really, really big on this one. So basically, alternate vendors, what it does, it has a new table that links items to vendors and item history to vendors and item attributes like price, vendor part number, its own description, and lead time. Okay, so it's basically just a field where you put a number, but at some point, I'm sure it'll be functional. So inside of the vendor center, you're now going to see an items tab, and you can see all the items associated with that vendor. This is really, really big, really useful. The other thing you're going to see is when you're creating a purchase order, you can actually see that multiple vendors could have different prices and different lead time for the same item. So this will allow you to sort of shop around the item or make decisions in who you should order this item from. Now, the way this screen looks is this is all vendor based. So you can see basically an item price list per vendor. So we'll show you that in the demo. All right, so let's switch over to demo. Back into QuickBooks. Okay, right. So let me start with the vendor center, and let me create a couple of vendors here. So we have Wholesale World. I'm going to create a new vendor called Widget Central, and another vendor called AA Electronics Corp. Okay. So I got 3 vendors here: Wholesale World, Widget Central, and AA Electronics World that I'm going to be dealing with for this particular example. I'm going to go into the list menu and click on Add, Edit, Multiple Item List. And there's a new option here under the list menu called Vendor Items. So we got vendor items now. And then what we can do is we can basically have an item list per vendor with its own attributes. I'm going to start with AA Electronics, and then I'm going to select here the different items. So I'm going to put here widget 1. I'm going to put here widget 2. And notice that I'm typing these by hand because there's no drop-down menu. Of course, somebody in Intuit, in the programming team, fell asleep and forgot to add a drop-down menu in this incredibly important place to have a drop-down menu. So I literally have to type the item name by hand, or copy and paste it from some spreadsheet and hope and dream that the spelling of the item is the same. Anyway, so let me have different item costs for all these items for this vendor. Again, this is based on the vendor. So this vendor sells this item for 80, this one for 120, and this one for 10. Okay, and then there's a new concept, a brand new concept, a new thing in the QuickBooks world called vendor part number. This is awesome. So for example, this vendor calls this widget its own thing, right? Right. So they say this vendor calls his widgets by this special name. Okay, so this allows me to describe to my vendor what I'm buying, and this could be completely different. Okay, and then we have the lead time. So let's say the lead time for this is 14. This doesn't specify if this is talking about days or weeks. I think they left it open. In my opinion, this is probably days, and I hope that it's based on days. Week is kind of a weird number to use. So I'm going to make the assumption officially that this is lead time days. Okay, I'm also going to add the vendor part number in the description. Okay, and under customized columns, you can choose which columns you can add here. And there's some additional notes here. For example, let's say this only comes in 12 packs and single units. And let's call this one brown bags. Okay, so we can add some additional notes that allows us to maybe decide, because one vendor sells a product in a very specific fashion, we can add some additional notes on basically how this vendor functions. I'm going to click save and close. Okay, now I'm going to pick a different vendor. Okay, I'm going to pick a different vendor altogether. I'm going to do the same thing, but let's say, for example, this vendor only sells widget 1 and widget 2. This vendor sells widget 1 for 75, this one for 150. The lead time here is 7 days. And let's say this one calls it, let's say WW1X and WW2X. Okay, so again, they have their own part numbers, their own nomenclature, their own codes, and you must use their codes for this to make sense when you're doing purchase orders. Okay, so I'm going to do save. Okay, and I'm going to do now the third vendor here, and let's say they only sell widget 3, and they sell it for $9, and the lead time is 20 days, and let's say this is WCC3R. Again, their own part numbers from their vendor's perspective. So beautiful. I have this screen that I can use copy and paste, and I can have my own item list linked to my vendors. So when I go to AA Electronics Corp and I click on the items tab, I see all the 3 items associated with that vendor, and I see the price that that vendor charges. If I go to Wholesale World, I see all the items that Wholesale World sells associated with this vendor. If I go to Widget Central, I see all the items that they do. Now I can click on edit items list here if I want to go back into that screen, and I can modify any of these if I want to. Okay, so save and close. Perfect. Okay, so that's kind of the first step. Each vendor is going to have its own sort of item list with its own attributes. I'm going to go into creating a purchase order. I'm going to create a purchase order, and let's say, for example, I don't know who I want to order from yet, so I'm going to leave that blank, and I'm going to pick widget 1 and widget 3. Okay, so I want to buy 100 of widget 1 and 50 of widget 3. So what does this screen look like? What is the advantage of having this vendor item list? So I got a couple things. One, on the top right, I can click on vendor, view vendor price, and I can pick one vendor, and it tells me how much they charge for, and their part number and their details. I can pick the other vendor, and I can see how much they charge for, and what vendor and what details, and I can go here and see how much they charge you for and what the lead time is and all that stuff. It also tells you when you last ordered it. So if it ever came across in a bill, when did that happen? Import date means the day that I went into that vendor item screen and I updated the information. So I can go across and compare the items Again, price and lead time, those two things are valuable. And you have the vendor part number and the vendor description. Now, where I think QuickBooks missed the mark is it would have been awesome to then click on a button that says, use this vendor, and it will take this information and apply it into the screen. But it doesn't, because nobody ever thinks about making our life easier. So let's say, for example, I wanted to use this vendor. I would have to now take note and say, okay, 80 and 10, and then click on close, and then go into the vendor, and then change this to 80 and 10. So this is where QuickBooks missed the mark big time, which is, okay, I got the screen there. I would love to press a button and it apply to the actual purchase order, so I don't have to manually put it there. So for now, this screen is just a display. It's just information that I can see and browse and possibly help me make a decision on which vendor to buy from, but this information does not pass through into the purchase order. So that's one thing where the QuickBooks missed the mark. The other thing where QuickBooks missed the mark is, what about this wonderful new vendor part number? It would be amazing to have a field that says vendor part number so I can see it. But no, it doesn't show it, okay? Because they completely botched this thing where they said, we're going to add a field that you cannot use anywhere else in QuickBooks. You can't use it on reports. You can't use it in forms. We're just going to add it in there for apparently no functional reason. So the part number is there only for information, but you can't do anything else for it. And that I hate that. Also, the description is also that frustrates me, because then I can't get the custom description to the vendor. Now, I hope that somebody from Intuit is watching and they say, Hector, come on, this is on our pipeline and we're going to fix this a month from now. And I would love it. That's the truth. Okay. And I really hope that that's what it is, that the intention is to get that data into the form and to get it to automate that way. Otherwise, this thing is pretty much useless. It's just a list. Okay. Now, the other thing worth looking at, there's this little icon which has sort of an arrow pointing right, an arrow pointing left next to the price. If I click on that, it's a slightly different screen. What this is now a comparison of the item across multiple vendors. So if I pick widget number 2, I can actually see the comparison with multiple vendors. I see widget number 3 is a comparison with multiple vendors. So again, there's two different screens. View vendor price, it's vendor specific. I pick the vendor and it tells me all the items under that vendor. But if I click on that little icon next to the rate, it shows me for the item across multiple vendors. Awesome, beautiful. I think they executed this beautifully. Now give me the option to double click on these things and the information actually come into the PO. That will make, sort of make everything great. But this is a really, really next step. And it's great, by the way. I think this feature is huge. I think it's really going to improve big time the purchasing process and being able to compare. It's just missing a couple of little buttons that can make this basically better. Okay, so that's kind of the first side of this. The second side of this, I'm going to go into item list. And I'm going to go into one of my items on my widget. And now I can have a preferred vendor. So let's say for my widget, my preferred vendor is AA Electronics. But I also want to tell QuickBooks that I have 2 other vendors I can buy this from. So I'm going to click on Manage. And I'm going to select, okay, I can also buy this from Wholesale World. So I'm going to call this an alternate vendor. And I can also buy this from Widget World and call this an alternate vendor. And then click on Save and Close. So now when I go into Manage, I can see in order my preferred vendor, my alternate vendors, and I can compare across when I'm looking at the item screen. So this is a kind of similar to the purchase order screen, but in this one, it's going to be in the item screen, and I can pick which of these vendors are my official alternate vendors for this item. I'm going to click OK. Then I go to widget number 2. Same thing. I'm going to say my preferred vendor is Wholesale World, but I'm going to click on Manage, and my alternate vendors is going to be Widget Central and AA Electronics. And then I click on Save and Close, go back to it, and then you can see I'm organized. So I can basically see across all of these. Now in here, I can't edit anything. I can't change any of the information. I wish I could. I don't know why, they wouldn't allow it to do that. I'm sure maybe they're trying to force the user to use a different screen, but it'd be really cool to have a button that says edit and be able to edit these things on the screen. For now, if I wanted to edit that, I have to go back into the list menu and edit multiple lists and go into vendor items and do it by vendor. So I kind of hate the fact that I can't unilaterally take one item and edit across multiple vendors. I have to go into each vendor to do it. But again, I think it's a great step. The multiple alternate vendors, to me, it's amazing. I love that. The other thing that's missing from this report is, from this function is if I go into reports, list, item listing or something like that, there should be a field for alternate vendors, and there isn't. Okay, there's preferred vendor. Okay, so I got a field for preferred vendor. I will see my preferred vendor here, but I'm missing the mark on, okay, alternate vendor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would love to see at least one field that shows me the alternate vendors. That would be valuable. One of the things that Intuit fails to do, and I tell this to the programmers all the time, and I'm saying it publicly here, they fail to create the accompanying report to every feature. I don't understand why they think a feature is functional without the accompanying report. To me, that's a huge problem. You need to have an accompanying report that shows me sort of a matrix of that item by vendor. But they haven't done that yet, and I hope that they're listening and watching and they're saying, Hector, don't worry about it. It's coming on release number 2 and number 3. And if you are, I love you for it. If you're not, then I need you to check your new features process, because you have to have accompanying reports for this. And this exists for pricing, by the way. So if you're using a price levels, there is a report that you can actually pick the price level, and it tells you that. So there should be a report where you pick the vendor and it shows you the item cost table, or you can compare it across multiple vendors. Maybe you pick 2 or 3 vendors and see all the items and cost across from it. The other thing that they failed to do, or the functional part of this, is, I'm going to go back to the purchase order for a second, is if we're working with lead time, okay? So if we're using lead time needs to have some sort of value. So in theory, the way lead time should work is QuickBooks should, and I'm going to show you where I think they're going with lead time, or I hope that they are. QuickBooks should use lead time to calculate the expected date. So for example, if all my items have a lead time of 14 days, this by default should push 14 days into the future. That's the logic. That's where lead time, it's supposed to be functional, right? For me to know how long it would take to bring this product. Now, it would be nice if we could also add the field for lead time, but again, missed the mark on that. So I don't have lead time as a custom field, unfortunately. So we need that. And we don't have vendor part number, which is the other new field that we're working, and we need that too. So that's what we need, right? We need the vendor part number in the purchase order, and we need the lead time in the purchase order. So this information becomes even more useful as the user, because what's the point of knowing what the lead time is if I can't show it anywhere? That's a big issue for me. So again, we're missing those 2 things. We're hoping that they're bringing this up in new features coming forward. And part of this webinar, by the way, so I can record it and send it to the developers and say, look, this is my criticism of your product, because for some reason you always do things halfway. I don't understand why they do that. I prefer that they release less features that are complete and functional than a whole bunch of halfway features. But this is how QuickBooks kind of starts. They do a test, people give them feedback, and they eventually get around to it. That's true. Sometimes it takes 3 years, but they do eventually get around to it. And when they do, it's a great win. But for now, I think it's valuable for you to know what this is. If you're recommending it to your customers, it's important not to sort of oversell it and set the wrong expectations. Because unfortunately, you tell a customer, hey, now you have alternate vendors, and we still have to deal with, partial features. All right. So the next one, I'm going to do just screenshots, because I'm saving sort of for my next webinar series. I'm sending the whole advanced inventory workflow for early 2020. So hopefully when they do all these updates, I'll be able to have a really comprehensive advanced inventory webinar series for QuickBooks Enterprise, where it ties all these things together. But a couple of years ago, they added the process of doing sales order picking and then sales order packing, which means you tell QuickBooks, hey, this is sent to pick, and then you change the update and say this is ready to pack, and you change it one more time to this is ready to ship. So it used to be a 3-step process. So now QuickBooks added basically a new feature that skips picking and packing, and it goes straight into a single workflow where it goes into pick pack. Now, the one thing is worth mentioning is you cannot disable separate picking and packing yet. So I would love, this feature would be much more closer to complete if I can disable pick pack and just use, picking and packing as a separate system and just have a single pick pack. So basically you have a sales order, you send it to Express Pick Pack. The person with the mobile device, can pick it and put it in a box and tell the people in the QuickBooks world that this is ready to be shipped. And then they press pick, and this goes into this pick pack world that tells the QuickBooks user that they're ready to invoice. That's really in a nutshell what this Express Pick Pack is. Now let's quickly go through screenshots of QuickBooks for Mac. Okay. So they added Modernized reporting screen. So basically, this is really, really cool. It adds to the right, basically like a little drawer where you can change the fields, the filters, the formatting. It's all within the report. And as you change it, you see it live on the report. That's awesome. I actually wish QuickBooks Desktop PC had this. This is amazing. So right now, I have to click on Customize. I have a different window and I have to change things and then click on sort of run report for it to run. This is all sort of live preview on the screen. So great job, QuickBooks Mac team, for adding that. I love that. The other thing is dark mode, right? So the newer version of QuickBooks, of Mac iOS has a dark mode, which I have it turned on in my computer, where everything is basically sort of a dark gray instead of white. So now QuickBooks also supports dark modes for those people that let's call them the gothic accountants that like dark mode on their QuickBooks Mac. And now QuickBooks Mac 2020 supports that. And there's a new company snapshot screen that basically mimics some of the reports that you see now on the QuickBooks Desktop snapshot. You can see it all within the screen, customize what it looks like. Really, really cool, really neat. As a matter of fact, the interface for this is actually better than the QuickBooks Desktop snapshot interface. It's prettier. Obviously, it's a Mac. That's what Macs do best, right? Graphics. It now supports e-payments. So if you have QuickBooks payments on your Mac, you can send invoices with a Pay Now button. So that's pretty cool, really neat. Overlooked feature for a very long time. I think it's really worth doing that. And that's it. So I'm going to leave it open for questions and comments. This might not be the best webinar on new features of QuickBooks 2020 because it was, I think, officially the first one. I don't think anybody else has done a webinar like this before. I literally had a day to prepare, 2 days to prepare with the official R1, which just came out 2 days ago. For us, I've been using the beta test for a very long time. So I've been sort of preparing, but I was waiting until literally last night to put the slides together to make sure nothing else was added. So there's my email address if you have some additional comments. Thank you very much. Join our Facebook group, and I'll see you on the next webinar on September 19th for QuickBooks Online Advanced Inventory Part 2. Thank you.